Someone in my inner circle tried to poison me. Not metaphorically. Not as a warning or a joke. Literally tried to end my life. I did not see it coming. I did not even suspect it at first. I am telling you this now because it came shockingly close to succeeding. I survived because I noticed things others might not, because I trusted my instincts, and because I refused to accept easy answers. This is not a story I wanted to tell. It is not for sympathy or attention. I am telling it because it can happen to anyone, even someone like me. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to you. I want to be clear. I'm not dramatizing. I'm not exaggerating. Someone who had access to my life, to my food, to my schedule, to the people around me, tried to do something unimaginably cruel. They thought no one would notice. They thought the systems, the doctors, the routines would fail me. For weeks I felt weaker, sicker, more confused, and I could not understand why. Everything felt wrong. My body was betraying me and nobody seemed to notice. I could not rely on anyone else to see it either. I know this will sound impossible to many of you. People might say this is a movie plot. It sounds paranoid. It sounds dramatic. But I assure you the facts are as real as they could be. I experienced every symptom. I ran every test. I investigated every angle. And eventually I found the truth. Someone wanted to harm me and they almost succeeded. I am telling you this because most men, myself included, ignore subtle warning signs. We think fatigue is just work, stress is just pressure, confusion is just age or tiredness. We assume we are overthinking. But sometimes you are not overthinking. Sometimes the danger is real and the consequences are life and death. I want to tell you exactly how it started, what I felt, and how I discovered what was happening. Because this story is not about fear. It is about survival. It is about paying attention. It is about trusting your instincts even when everyone else says you are wrong. It began with small things. Slight nausea, fatigue that sleep did not fix, moments of dizziness. I brushed them off. I told myself it was just too much work, too little rest. But it did not go away. It became stronger, more persistent. My body began to feel like it was against me. The fatigue was so deep that no amount of sleep made me feel rested. The headaches were dull but constant and my focus became unreliable. I would start sentences and forget what I wanted to say. I would walk into rooms and not remember why. It terrified me. Because I know my mind and I know what is normal for me. I knew something was wrong. I went to doctors, specialists, and every test came back normal. Every explanation was dismissed as stress, overwork, or mental strain. I know stress. This was not stress. This was something physical, something deliberate, something planned. I refused to stop searching. I insisted on further testing even when the doctors said it was unnecessary and expensive. I pushed forward. And slowly the pieces began to fit together in a way that made sense. If you are watching this, pay attention. I survived. I am alive because I did not accept the easy answers. I trusted my instincts and pushed for the truth. I am telling you this because someone needs to hear it before it happens to them. The signs are subtle. The danger is real. And the lessons are worth knowing. The first signs were subtle. I noticed I felt tired in a way that sleep could not fix. I would wake up after 8 hours and feel as though I had barely rested. My stomach felt off, a dull nausea that came and went, sometimes fading but never disappearing completely. Headaches began to appear, dull and constant, different from anything I had experienced before. My muscles felt weak. Carrying anything heavier than usual became a strain. I assumed it was just stress or exhaustion. I travel a lot. I work long hours. I assumed the body was simply sending a message that it needed a break. For days I tried to ignore it. I pushed myself. I kept up with meetings, with calls, with projects. SpaceX and Tesla do not wait for anyone to rest. I told myself that the fatigue was temporary, that the nausea was minor, that the headaches would pass. I thought maybe it was just jet lag catching up with me, or the weight of constant decision-making wearing me down. It made sense at the time. There was always a logical explanation. I wanted to believe there was. But the symptoms did not improve. The fatigue became persistent. Sleep did not refresh me. The nausea was steady, interfering with my appetite and concentration. My hands shook slightly when I tried to write or type. I began to notice that my mind was foggy. I would start thinking about a project and forget my next step. I would walk into a room and not remember why I was there. That was the first moment I felt real fear. Not for my work, not for deadlines, but for myself. Something was not right and I could feel it deep in my body. I went to my doctor for reassurance. I expected tests, answers, guidance. Instead, I received explanations that did not satisfy me. Burnout, stress, maybe anxiety, the doctor suggested. Maybe I needed a break or some time off. I knew my body and my mind. I knew this was not burnout. I knew this was not normal stress. Something physical was happening, something hidden, something deliberate. I left with frustration but also determination. I decided to monitor everything, to track symptoms, and to push for further investigation. I would not settle for assumptions. The decline was gradual but unmistakable. Weakness deepened. Carrying myself through a full day of work became exhausting. My mind, once sharp and agile, felt clouded. Complex calculations that I normally handled easily now took extra effort. Planning meetings and engineering reviews required far more focus. I began to fear that I was losing my edge, that my capacity to lead and make decisions was slipping in a way I could not control. The thought terrified me. At work, I forced myself through long hours, but the cognitive fog grew heavier. My attention faltered. I misread data, repeated myself in meetings, forgot details I had known by heart. SpaceX launches, Tesla production schedules, and engineering challenges cannot wait for anyone to recover. I pushed through, but inside, a quiet alarm sounded. Something serious was happening. I sought more opinions from other doctors and specialists. Each time the tests came back normal. No cause was found. The doctors remained puzzled. They suggested age, stress, or perhaps something psychosomatic. I knew they were wrong. I could feel the truth in my body, in every ache, every lapse, every tremor. The tension inside me grew. Every day was a battle to maintain focus while my strength ebbed away. It was a strange combination of fear and disbelief. I was strong, capable, and analytical, yet something unseen was undermining me from within. My mind refused to settle. Every symptom, every failure to find a diagnosis, became a piece of a puzzle I could not ignore. The pace of my life demanded action. I decided I would investigate, I would dig deeper, and I would not stop until I understood what was happening to me. I realized I could not wait for someone else to find the cause. The doctors had tried and they failed. Tests came back normal, explanations were vague, and I could feel my body continuing to weaken. I decided I had to take matters into my own hands. I became my own investigator. I started documenting everything, tracking every symptom, every meal, every interaction. I went through my schedule, my diet, my supplements, anything that could affect my body. I wanted to leave no stone unturned. I spent hours reading medical literature. I searched for combinations of symptoms that matched what I was experiencing. Fatigue, nausea, headaches, muscle weakness, cognitive impairment. There were dozens of possibilities. Chronic fatigue syndrome, autoimmune disorders, early-stage cancers, rare metabolic issues. Nothing fit perfectly, and none of the conditions should have been invisible to the tests I had already undergone. I became obsessed, turning every symptom over and over in my mind. Every theory I found had gaps. Every explanation fell short. Then, buried in a toxicology textbook, I saw something that stopped me. Chronic low-dose poisoning. Heavy metals, certain rare toxins, substances that could affect the body gradually over weeks. The symptoms matched almost exactly. Fatigue, gastrointestinal issues, cognitive fog, muscle weakness. Everything I had been feeling. My heart raced as I read the descriptions. It made sense in a way nothing else had. I had never suspected poisoning. It seemed impossible. But the more I read, the more the pieces fit. I brought the information to my doctor. I explained the possibilities, the symptoms, the gradual decline. He was skeptical. Heavy metal poisoning is rare, he said. There was no obvious source of exposure, he added. He warned me about the cost of testing and the low likelihood of finding anything. I listened, but I did not let the skepticism shake me. Something was wrong. I had to know. I demanded a full toxicology panel. Lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium, thallium, every toxin they could test for. I told him I would pay for it myself. 3 days later, the results came back. Thallium. Elevated levels, enough to explain every symptom I had experienced. Chronic exposure, not a single incident. I stared at the report, disbelief running through me. My body had been under attack, slowly poisoned, and nobody saw it. Not the doctors, not my team, not anyone around me. The realization hit me like a physical blow. This was not accidental. This was deliberate. Someone had targeted me. Shock gave way to anger. Anger gave way to fear. I thought about the people around me, those with access to my meals, my schedule, my life. I could not believe it, and yet the evidence was undeniable. Every symptom, every test, every failure of explanation led to one conclusion. This was not just a medical mystery. This was a calculated attempt to harm me. I felt betrayed, exposed, and deeply vulnerable, but also determined. I would find out who had done this, and I would not stop until I understood how and why it had happened. Once the toxicology results confirmed thallium, I knew I could not investigate alone. I brought in my security team and a private investigator, a former law enforcement officer who specialized in personal security in high-stakes cases. I explained the situation in full detail, sharing everything I knew about my symptoms, my schedule, my diet, and everyone who had access to my life. They took it seriously. We began analyzing everything. First, the food. Every meal, every ingredient, every source. We went through suppliers, kitchen deliveries, restaurant visits, and personal meals prepared at home. Every laboratory sample, every ingredient that entered my life over the past month was accounted for and tested. Every possibility had to be explored. Next, we looked at employees, household staff, anyone who had regular access to my home or workspace. We examined routines, schedules, and personal interactions. Each person was interviewed carefully. Every gesture, every opportunity, every interaction was evaluated. We even looked at catered events I had attended, everything that might have allowed someone to introduce the toxin. The deeper we dug, the more the suspicion grew. I had always trusted the people around me. I believed in loyalty. I believed in discretion. But the more we analyzed, the more I realized that trust is fragile. Access alone does not prove guilt, but access combined with opportunity and the right knowledge created a narrow list of people who could have done this. It was terrifying to think that someone I had welcomed into my life, someone I had allowed close, could have harmed me in this way. We mapped out the chain of exposure, the timeline of symptoms, and the availability of the toxin. Every clue pointed to a single possibility. Someone had deliberately introduced thallium in small, calculated doses over time. It was not reckless. It was careful, patient, and precise. The thought made me angry, and at the same time, it made me even more determined to find the exact source. Finally, after testing every ingredient and container in my kitchen, the moment came. One commonly used container, something I reached for every day, tested positive. Thallium was present in microdoses. The levels were low enough that I did not immediately collapse, but consistent enough to slowly weaken me, impair my focus, and make me vulnerable. The container had been tampered with deliberately. It was not an accident, it was not contamination from the environment, and it was not a coincidence. Someone had calculated every detail to make sure I became sick without immediate detection. Holding the container in my hand, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. The realization hit me harder than any symptom ever could. This was not random. This was not careless. It was methodical. Every dose had been deliberate, calculated, and consistent. Every moment of weakness I had felt, every lapse in focus, every day I woke up exhausted was part of a plan. The investigators confirmed it. They mapped the microdosing schedule, calculated the exposure, and verified the source. Chronic poisoning at this level does not kill immediately, but it debilitates, confuses, and breaks trust. It breaks the mind as well as the body. The betrayal was complete and the message was clear. Someone had targeted me and executed it with precision. I stared at the evidence, knowing that I survived because I did not accept easy explanations. I survived because I questioned the normal, because I refused to trust blindly, and because I pushed for every test, every analysis, every lead. The person responsible had tried to manipulate the system, to exploit trust, and to hide behind normalcy. They almost succeeded. But I was alive and I had the truth in my hands. When the investigators laid out the possible motives, the picture became darker than anything Elon Musk expected. They explained that the person behind this did not need to hate him. They only needed him weakened. That idea hit him harder than any lab report. The first motive was the most obvious. Weakening him would destabilize his companies. Analysts have pointed out for years that Tesla and SpaceX move heavily with his presence and decision-making, so harming his health could disrupt both operations and stock performance. Research on executive dependency in major tech firms supports this pattern, and it made the theory feel uncomfortably real. Political motives were next. Musk's influence in government conversations, space contracts, and public policy had created many opponents over time. The investigators knew the pattern, because high-profile business figures often become targets when their positions overlap with geopolitical interests. Reports on political targeting of business leaders show a similar risk profile. Ideological motives were on the list as well. Musk's public statements have always created strong reactions, both positive and negative. Experts have documented how ideological extremism often turns successful figures into symbols rather than people, which makes them easier to attack. The final motive was financial gain. Weakening him could spark chaos in the markets. Anyone positioned correctly could profit while everything looked like normal volatility. Financial crime analysts have shown how targeted instability can produce huge returns for people who stay hidden. When Musk looked at the full list, he realized that any one of these motives was possible. He admitted something that most people with his level of influence never say. The real motive might stay unknown forever, and that truth might be the most unsettling part of the entire case. Once the investigators confirmed it was a targeted poisoning case, Musk started to feel the emotional impact that no public statement could explain. He spoke about how trust collapses when someone close to you betrays you. It does not matter if the person is a coworker, a chef, or a staff member. The moment you learn the threat came from inside your daily life, the entire structure of trust begins to fall. Psychologists describe this as threat generalization, where the brain starts to see danger everywhere after a betrayal. He began to notice the shift in his own behavior. He became hyper-alert. Every sound, every movement, every routine felt different. Research on survivors of targeted harm shows this reaction is common, especially among men in high-pressure roles who are used to controlling their environment. They start to scan for danger even in safe spaces. Conversations began feeling staged. Friendly interactions felt rehearsed. Simple questions felt like tests. He explained that it was not fear of death that changed him. It was the loss of certainty. Anyone could hide a motive behind a smile. Anyone could pretend to be loyal while working against you. Studies on workplace betrayal confirm that this type of breach can create long-lasting distrust, even when the threat is gone. Many men relate to this shift. Loyalty is simple until it breaks. After that, survival becomes the main focus. Musk said that the experience forced him to look at every relationship differently. The emotional break was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet. It was the slow realization that life would never feel the same again. When Musk agreed to speak about the case, he said something that surprised even the investigators. He explained that targeted poisoning is not rare. It happens far more often than people think, especially in circles where power, money, or influence create pressure. Forensic reports from the World Health Organization and the United States National Library of Medicine have documented how poisoning incidents often go unreported because victims never realize what is happening. He warned that wealthy individuals face a real risk because their routines are predictable. Consistency makes access easy. Business competitors have also been targets in past cases, especially in industries where contracts shift markets or affect major investments. Public figures deal with a different type of exposure, because large audiences attract unstable individuals and ideological threats. Studies on violence against public figures show that targeted harm often begins with small steps, not dramatic events. He also pointed out that elderly and medically vulnerable people face the highest risk in private settings. Slow poisoning can mimic age-related decline, so many families never question the symptoms until it is too late. Research from the National Institute on Aging has confirmed how easily chronic toxins can be mistaken for natural health issues. Then Musk repeated a line that stayed with everyone in the room. He said it with a steady voice, not fear. It is not paranoia if someone is actually trying to kill you. That line was not meant to shock people. It was meant to make them understand how real the threat becomes when your life, your work, and your future depend on the truth. Musk shared the same list the forensic team gave him during the investigation. The first sign was unexplained fatigue. Chronic poisoning often drains energy because the toxins interfere with basic cellular function. The Centers for Disease Control has documented this pattern in several toxin exposure studies. Neurological changes were next. This includes brain fog, dizziness, numbness, shaking, or trouble focusing. Even low-dose exposure can affect the nervous system if it happens repeatedly. Medical reviews in the National Center for Biotechnology information show this effect across several types of toxins. Stomach issues were another major indicator. Nausea, cramps, and irregular digestion can appear when the body keeps fighting something it cannot identify. Many heavy metals and chemical agents create these reactions long before more serious damage appears. The final sign was the most important. If your symptoms improve when you leave your home or workplace, it is a major red flag. Environmental medicine experts call this pattern location-dependent exposure, which means something in your regular environment is harming you. Musk said that he ignored these signs at first because every symptom looked small. That was the entire danger. Slow poisoning hides behind simple explanations unless you question it early. Musk explained that going public was not a dramatic move. It was a protective one. Investigators told him that disclosure removes the advantage from whoever is responsible. Poisoning thrives in secrecy. Silence makes the victim easy to control, easy to mislead, and easy to weaken. When the story becomes public, the threat becomes visible, and visibility reduces the attacker's power. Cases studied by forensic investigators show that exposure often stops ongoing attempts because it increases the risk of being caught. He said he is speaking now because most people ignore their instincts. They feel something is wrong, but they convince themselves it is stress or bad sleep. He learned that the mind tries to protect itself from frightening possibilities, even when the danger is real. Researchers at the American Psychological Association have written about this response and how it often keeps victims from acting in time. Musk ended with a clear message. Trust yourself. If your body is telling you something feels wrong, you must push for answers. If the people around you dismiss your concerns, you must look deeper. Your health is not a guessing game, and your life is not something you risk to avoid sounding dramatic. He said that speaking publicly is not about fear. It is about awareness. It is about giving people enough knowledge to protect themselves before it is too late.